So government's headline is, of course, Apple makes push notification spying more difficult. Governments will find push notification spying harder to do now that they no longer enjoy easy access to records of push notifications sent to iPhone users. Apple changes policy so that law enforcement and other government agencies need a court order to obtain this data now. So this all came up last week when Senator Roy Wyden sent an open letter to Attorney General Garland, alerting the public to this practice. And what's happening is because your push notifications go through an Apple server, there's a record of all this stored. And so, particularly for Apple, this was a a problem because Apple, all they required was a subpoena to get this information. Google always required a court order. After this news of this came out, then Apple and Google both, came clean isn't the right way to describe it, but they
weren't allowed to talk about it before
Right.
this report was public, and then once it
Really?
was made public, then they could admit that they were doing it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Somebody leaked
Correct.
it strategically.
Yeah, open letter. I mean, so that worked out. Apple immediately said, "Okay, great. Now we can talk about it. We can confirm this is happening." And then I don't know, within a day or several days, they had already made their policy different so that it's harder to get access to this data. And it's as mentioned, it's not as sensitive as like text messages, iMessages. iMessages are encrypted end to end. But they can't. People could, law enforcement could develop information about you based on these push notifications. What you got, they could figure out where you are. Maybe they sometimes the metadata in a push notification includes text like, "Hi, we'll be at your address at this address in 20 minutes." So it is a good thing that now it's harder for law enforcement to just get a hold of this stuff, from a privacy perspective.
Like, it is possible for more notifications to be encrypted end to end, but a lot of apps aren't done that way. So I took a data processing course in college. It would be trivially easy, even if you only have like basic metadata about the notifications, to piece together who's talking to who, where you are, stuff like that. Like this is
to piece
this is kind
together.
of
Okay, yeah.
yeah. It's kind of a terrible thing that's happening.
I thought you were going to say it would be
becoming less terrible.
Trivially easy to protect and encrypt your notifications end to end. So I was like, why aren't they doing it? But it is funny to me that all Apple had to do is just require a court order. Like that was the solution. I mean, look, if there's a court order, there's a court order, right? But why wasn't Apple doing that in the first place?
Yeah, it is kind of a weird question, right? Like,
Yeah.
why
Maybe
did
they
have
didn't know
such a
that Google
lax
was
stance?
requiring that, and so they didn't know that they were allowed to do that.
Oh, interesting.
That's my theory, but
Huh.
maybe they
Like
only changed it since they were called out on it. I
This
don't know.
whole gag order stuff, man, I don't know. So it's like you have the government forcing you to do something, but they don't let you talk about it. I don't have warm fuzzy feelings about that, to be honest. I feel like Apple should be allowed to say, "Hey everyone, just so you know, here's how, things are working, and we just want you to know that this might be something you might want to pay attention to." Because if your notifications can be farmed by a government and they can probably learn all sorts of stuff about you, then what's the purpose of having all the privacy built into the iPhone if all that information can just be pulled from your notifications? Every app that I have sends me notifications about everything. So it seems like they could probably, as Griffin said, piece together most stuff that I thought was private. There's a lot of things I'm trying to hide, Lewis. You know that.
I'm sure.
Not as many as LK. I mean, I don't have an open investigation from the DEA that I know of. But I guess they don't tell you, do they?
Not if it's a secret investigation.
I think this probably matters even more in other countries, being able to pull stuff and get information on people where there may not be as many privacy rules as we have here in the U.S. I don't know. It seems important everywhere. Anything else to add to this story, Lewis, or should we go ahead and just move on?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's that much to add to it. It's just an interesting. It was like a weird privacy loophole, and the law enforcement and governments around the world figured out how to do it. And I agree with you. I mean, it is bizarre that Apple had such a low bar for getting that information and previous to this. So.
Well, when you're working with a government, I can imagine that you maybe aren't quite sure how to proceed. because you don't want to like do something illegal. But just saying that out loud, Apple has the best lawyers in the world.
I was going to say, yeah.
You know?
I mean, it's their job to know this, right? So
Yeah. You would
I think
so.
one of the more interesting follow-ups to this story from like, I don't know, 8 years ago when there was the whole Apple versus the FBI thing. If you don't remember the details, it was like the FBI had this phone. They wanted Apple to write a special version of iOS that would allow them to break into the phone. And the most interesting part of the follow-up to that story is that when Apple executives received that court order, like their whole executive team basically holed up in a meeting room and like outlined all of every possible response they could have for like the next 24, 28 hours until they finally deliberated and came up with their solution to actually like push back and fight against the FBI on it.
Wow.
So they take this stuff seriously.
I can't imagine what Tim Cook's life is like. How could you have a family and be an executive at Apple? The company commands your every moment. All these urgent things that pop up, they don't care if you're asleep. They don't care if you're at a birthday party. You have to figure stuff out on the fly. You react to things instantly. Apple must just be their lives. It's all that they do. I wonder how many of them even have kids. Does Craig Federighi have like a family? I don't even know.